to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first is with reference to what are the developments in the political arena, particularly, of course, with reference to what is going on in terms of the expected return of the PML N leader, Mr. Nawaz Sharif, which is something that the former Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has also spoken about, giving even a date for his return. This is, of course, something that has been discussed at length. And so we're going to try and understand what this means, not only for the PML N, of course, but also in terms of the entire public and its impact on the political situation. It's a tough time for the country in terms of the kind of challenges we all face. But in terms of what lies ahead for Mr. Nawaz Sharif is also a question mark, particularly in terms of the legal implications that exist, since, of course, he's going to be returning to the country after a long period of almost 4 years. And, of course, within the cases that are still sub judice, he went on a medical ground, and this is going to be the first time he's going to return after that. And so whether or not there are going to be serious consequences as soon as he returns is something that is a lot under consideration. This was also a question to the current caretaker Prime Minister, who responded that it is up to the law enforcement agencies to decide whether to handcuff the leader upon his return to the country, and that it is the matter that they are going to deem appropriate. More than that also is how the court proceedings are then going to take place. Of course, we know he had also been declared an absconder, an offender in the new previous courts, and this is especially important given the fact that how his political involvement will be, given the fact that he's been disqualified also. And so with reference to all of these cases, we're going to try and understand what sort of action points still remain for the PML N and what are the immediate repercussions of the return of Mr. Nawaz Sharif and what sort of steps are going to be taken moving forward in light of all of this. This is, of course, something that is also going to be important in terms of the kind of support that the PML N has or is hoping to have with his return, and whether or not his presence in the country prior to the elections is going to be of significant help to the PML N. This, of course, also points towards whether or not we're going to have any sort of early elections in this process as well, and whether Mr. Nawaz Sharif is going to impact all of that. And then, of course, the discussion on numerous strategies and way forwards, particularly also comments with reference to the actions taken by the PDM government, and then, of course, issues of huge importance such as the economic prosperity of the country and terrorism as well. So that is going to be the focus of our first segment today. Our next one is going to further explore what is going on within our neighborhood, and especially, of course, in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, where, of course, we have been seeing again moving forward similar kind of issues and clashes that unfortunately we see in the way that we move forward towards the elections and before the elections, especially with reference to what goes on in terms of curbing any and every movement towards freedom and the right to self-determination of the people of Kashmir. And so what has happened in Anantnag is also something that is of huge concern, and whether or not this is something that is going to be sort of a precursor of what lies ahead, and is only sort of a false flag operation that has been conducted by the BJP just to give a boost to Modi's elections based on, of course, the kind of ideology that we've always seen in the past as well. So that's what we're going to focus on the second segment of the show as well. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analysts Farrukh Pitafi and Faisal. We've also been joined online by Ms. Batool Rajput, who's a senior journalist, and Mr. Muneeb Qadir, who's a political analyst and legal expert. And let me start with you, Muneeb Saab. The situation, of course, is extremely important with reference to the impact that it's going to have on the political scenario. And of course, the legal implications of the return are something that everyone wonders. And I want you to give us an understanding of what happens when somebody, anybody in the position of Mr. Nawaz Sharif, who's gone away in the middle of certain cases against him from the country and then returns 4 years later. What does the law say about any such person returning to the country after these years, and what is the next step forward?
Firstly, PML N has very happily declared that Nawaz Sharif is returning on 21st October, and they expect that his return is going to breathe a new lease of life into PMLN, which has faced a lot of criticisms of their handling of the PDM government for 16 months. And perhaps, the impression that they're trying to now create is that that was not the real PMLN in its full element. It can only happen under Mia Nawaz Sharif's leadership on the ground. So there is a lot of excitement surrounding his return, but at the same time, as you've mentioned, there could be legal implications as well because he had been declared an absconder. He had been let out in 2019 because he cited health reasons, due to which he had to go to the UK, but he never returned. And now he's returning after a 4-year gap. Also, the fact that in 2017, the Panama judgment against him disqualified him for life from holding a public position, which also included, being able to hold the position of the party chairman. Now, the thing is that upon his return, whether he's going to be arrested, whether he's going to be taken to task in legal sense for having, as they say, absconding, that remains to be seen. But at the same time, one could say that if he could somehow prove that the decisions that were taken against him were unfounded, and in that regard, all the cases against his relatives, including his children, a lot of them have been declared to be bogus. And their children and his relatives and Mr. Shabazz Sharif himself, they've all been acquitted in those cases. They have been termed to be fabricated or, rooted in baseless evidence. So if somehow or the other Mr. Nawaz Sharif could prove that the cases against him were false, he could, try to come up with a narrative that that doesn't make him an absconder from not submitting to or for not surrendering to unfounded, unfair convictions. If he can manage to do something along those lines, then he stands a lot of chance. And we must also not forget, as far as disqualification is concerned, that an amendment to the Elections Act 2017 had been made by the previous PDM government, which limited disqualification to maximum 5 years, even retrospectively in previous cases which have already been decided. So he stands a lot of chance, legally speaking, to be able to regain what he had lost 5-6 years ago, and to be able to be a front runner in the upcoming election.
Right, but I want to also understand, Muneeb Saab, in your legal opinion, then is that something that is the appropriate way forward, especially in terms of the way that the cases were handled? I want you to explain to us, in a situation where we're not talking about a PMLN leader or Mr. Nawaz Sharif in particular, and in general, in terms of any person involved in any such activity or convicted, and then there is, of course, serious reservations towards the cases, and then of course his return or whatever step forward is there. Is that the route that the legal system provides?
The legal system can definitely provide you a route if lawful conviction. I mean, putting it other way, it is a crime, it is an offense to run away or to flee away or to evade arrest or to evade legal consequences if it was a lawful conviction. But somehow you can turn the tables around if you can bring in evidence to suggest that your conviction itself was unlawful. So, I mean, with that regard, it's not insignificant entirely that the lawyer for PTI, Mr. Hamid Khan himself, had said that, the decision to disqualify him in the Panama case had already been made before the judges had declared the verdict, and it was made outside the courtroom. Now, how exactly had that happened, or why exactly, and how exactly he's saying that remains to be seen. But all I'm saying is that his own opponent's lawyer has said something like that, so that holds a lot of credence and credibility. It's all about how you can maneuver legal talking points in your favor. That's what a good lawyer does, and that's what a good legal team does. Now, would Mia Nawaz Sharif in particular, or anyone in that situation, generally speaking, have good legal arguments at their disposal? That is up to them. But I'm just saying that there's a lot of margin and room for maneuver there.
All right. Ms. Batool, the situation, of course, is also politically very important, especially in terms of the timings, given the fact that there is still discussion on when exactly the elections are going to happen. And of course, that previously also we saw that there were a lot of discussions around how the major political rival that the PMLN faces is from the PTI, and he's behind bars. And then, of course, with reference to the way that the team or the party is planning to move ahead also involves him getting back an opportunity of participating in the political arena, as Mr. Muneeb was talking about, in not a very long time. And so I want to understand then, how do you see Mr. Nawaz Sharif's return in terms of what is being said by his party leaders as the Nawaz Sharif effect that's going to be there on party supporters and the current political dynamic?
Is this question for me? Is this for
yes.
me? Is this question for me? Okay. Well, I think it is very challenging for Nawaz Sharif that how he's face his voters now, because right after the entire came in, we saw that the leaders, the main leaders of went to London, and I think when he come back, the team of PMLN will be, I think, because their London tours will be decreased, and they would have been really costing for them. So I think the first question for Nawaz Sharif that I have is, how is going to explain to supporters that what exactly the government did for 16 months? What has this very moment for the elections? Why was he away for 4 long years? Because he has been traveling to other in the world, but he could not come back to Pakistan. So I think at this very moment, the voters are not very much unaware. They know what is going on. They realize that whatever is in the power, if he realizes or means he has to stay in the country. Nawaz Sharif is not there. Nawaz Sharif is not there. Before the Agra, he went. So I think for this way, at this very moment, it is very important that if Nawaz Sharif comes back, if we do consider it as a welcome news, it is very important to have a clear roadmap at the PMLN, how he is going to address the difference within the parties, how he is going to address the people who has literally parted ways, like Karnavasi and Miftai. I think he has to revisit that how he has to regain vote bank that primarily PML lost by polls or the elections before this year. So I think Nawaz Sharif is not. I don't believe that Nawaz Sharif is prepared for that, because if he were, we could have seen something on the ground. Sagar was very much with IMF. Mr. Ismail was working hard, not do anything. It was clear that the PMLN decisions, they were controlled remotely, and it was not very practical approach, and it had to change. And Nawaz Sharif was he was waiting for some signals. But I think it is not about relationships of establishment and PMLN at this very moment. It is how exactly Nawaz Sharif is going to deal within the party with his people, with his support.
Right, absolutely, and that's an important point, because I want to also understand then what is the strategy of the PMLN and what they're thinking. And Farrukh, I want to take your perspective in terms of course, it seems that this is something that has come in a very planned way in terms of when Mr. Nawaz Sharif should return to the country, and then if upon his return, what sort of legal actions the party is going to take and what sort of political implications it hope for. What do you think in terms of what we're seeing is the strategy by the PMLN at the moment, and what will be Mr. Nawaz Sharif's role in the immediate and middle term, especially before the elections?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the question. I think it is a very important question. And you're right, it has come ahead with in a very planned way. But with due respect, whether it is a good plan or not, it is still to be seen. If you remember, when the previous government had actually taken over power, at that time you had asked me about PTI's popularity and whether PML N actually stood a chance or not. At that time, I actually reminded you that Mian Nawaz Sharif is one factor who can actually have very interesting kind of consequences, right? And I actually retold you the example of his return during General Musharraf's time, when it was thought that PMLQ has Punjab as a slam dunk. But at that time he came back. Even Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto was assassinated, yet Punjab actually went to PMLN, and that was primarily due to Mian Nawaz Sharif. No other person in the party has the kind of pull that he has over people of Punjab. So that is one thing that could have happened. But I think that PMLN has been taking bad advice, and they have wasted incredible amount of time. 6 months into power, when the previous government was in power, he should have come at that time. He would have actually cleared all the legal hurdles as well. He would have taken care of a lot of issues by then, and would have started a narrative that would have supported that government as well and his own popularity. Now, given that he is entering into this game so late, right, we don't know what exactly is going to become of the appeal, because at this moment it seems that there is a lot of economic distress, there is a lot of polarization in the society, and the window of time that was accorded to Mian Nawaz Sharif to come back, that somehow has been lost. That is not all. Something else has happened, and that is regarding the alienation of, come again. Okay, I thought that you were saying something.
But why did they decide not to plan Mr. Nawaz Sharif's return then?
It was bad advice. Secondly, I think they have also dropped another ball, that is, taking along People's Party. The way caretaker setup was actually built, especially in Sindh, People's Party immediately felt that it is being alienated. And today you saw their presser as well, their repeated assertion that there has to be a level playing field. Remember, finally, Election Commission has moved in, and it has started taking action, like once we saw in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, where the entire cabinet was vacated. In Sindh, we have seen the portfolio of finance being taken away from Yunus Daga. Again, Yunus Daga Sahab is a great bureaucrat, but he is accused to be closer to PMLN, right? So with that kind of a situation, it seems that PMLN has mismanaged the situation a lot. We still don't know what becomes of how they actually go into the election and what kind of narrative they are going to have, but they certainly kept on acting on a lot of bad advice. Sana.
Right. Faisal, when we take a look at the situation, it also, of course, points towards the way that we'd hope then are going to be the steps taken by different political parties in light of the general elections. And there was a lot of talk about, of course, who exactly is going to lead the campaign, what sort of mandate are they going to put forward, what sort of solutions are they going to provide. And a lot of the times we've seen the PMLN taking advice from Mr. Nawaz Sharif, even if it wasn't actively involved at the forefront. But he has been there in terms of his political input, which has been very strong throughout. So I want to understand then, when we talk about the Nawaz Sharif effect, what sort of position or role do you see him playing, especially in terms of electoral campaigns, and then also in terms of the strategy and mandate for issues such as the economic challenges the country faces, the issue of terrorism, and the way that the PMLN will be able to provide solutions that perhaps others may not?
If we look at what kind of role obviously former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif is going to play, first of all we need to figure out if he's coming back or not, because if we look at the party itself, they have been giving different dates since a long time that he is returning to Pakistan. As Farrukh has earlier mentioned, that he has already obviously missed the bus. If he would have come back to Pakistan a lot earlier, then it would have been easier for party itself to gain momentum in Punjab. But if we look at obviously the personality itself, of course that personality is key, very important for not only for the party itself but Pakistan as well. He was obviously Prime Minister thrice, and he has proven again and again that he has capability to lead this country, and of course his party as well. But I was going through a few of the statements from the tier 2 and tier 3 leadership of PML N today, and they have categorically said for their followers that of course if former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif is coming back to Pakistan, then of course he is going to lead not only the campaign but he is our candidate to be the next Prime Minister as well. Now if we come towards how he is going to come back, of course the 21st of October is the date which is being talked about that he's coming back. Here the role of his Dr. Adnan would be pivotal. Why I'm saying this? Because when he went out, when he left the country, that was the time when he played a key role. He was the one who actually obviously told everyone about his medical conditions at that time, and we since then know that he did not of course attend the courts, and courts been asking him to come back, and that is how he became absconder. And if he has become absconder, then time and again we were hearing about letters being pushed by Dr. Adnan since a long time to the courts, and I think them letters, and moreover another statement which would be a fresh statement obviously once again from Dr. Adnan, which would be given to the courts, that this is what his condition was since last 4 years. That is why he couldn't make it to Pakistan, and now he is able to come back. So they would request for obviously the courts to look into this matter from a different angle, from a humanitarian angle, because he of course for 4 years was in England, and obviously he was on the medical grounds in England, and the letters which would be given to the courts from Dr. Adnan, they would be quite pivotal in coming days, and it's all about, it would be seen how a court can simply accept that or not.
Yeah,
it is going to be
but that is not going to help him in campaign.
It is not going to help him in campaign, but if we talk about campaign, of course we know that as long as it is Punjab, he is accepted throughout Punjab, from South Punjab to the upper North Punjab. He is accepted everywhere. To me, I think it would be quite fascinating to see him back and doing the full-fledged campaign, because that is the only way PML N can gain the momentum back. Now it is all about the time frame when the elections are going to be taking place. That is crucial. If the elections
Farrukh, do you also agree that he might not be coming on the date that has been shared?
Come again, you're talking about Nawaz Sharif would return to the country on given date. I think this time when this date was being given by the head of the party, at that time Nawaz Sharif was standing right beside him. So I'm going to take that on face value. But once again, my problem is that no matter when the elections take place, it is too late in the game. And I think it is going to have serious problems for the party, because in Punjab also we have seen that these space is really polarized.
But I think if the elections are going to take place in let's say middle of February or early March, then it would be quite interesting to see how he conducts his campaign.
After coming back. Returning in October, you're talking about February.
Mr. Muneeb, the situation, when we take a look at what's going on, there is also, of course, then the concern in terms of what Faisal was talking about regarding, of course, his reports and the involvement of his doctors. But I also want to know your political opinion with regards to the fact whether or not when exactly the elections take place is going to factor in how much Mr. Nawaz Sharif will be able to pull support from the public. Of course, we're looking at a timeline which is varied in terms of things showing up also in November, or then, of course, in January or even March that was debated upon. Do you think that the longer he will be able to secure and garner some support?
Exactly. The longer the time he gains, the more he can galvanize and he can lobby, he can search for support from his base, his support base, who might have been alienated due to, the unfortunate combination of factors which have led to some very unfortunate events in the past few months. In the last 16 months, actually, rising inflation, security threats, the electricity bill crisis, etc., almost an economic collapse, which was very narrowly averted when the IMF deal had been secured. So there might be some sort of feeling of disappointment, and the supporters, Noon League supporters, might be a bit disgruntled as well. So now, there needs to be new life, fresh breath of air, which needs to be infused into the energy that PML N may have for their supporters. The longer the time that Nawaz Sharif has for campaigning, for electoral campaigning, the better it is for him, because there's a lot of lost political goodwill, lost political ground, which has to be recovered. And, although President Arif Alvi has recommended that election be held on 6th November, realistically speaking, that just doesn't seem to be a possibility at all. And there is a whole wrangling of who gets to announce the election date. Is it the president's prerogative at all, given the amendments to the Elections Act under sections 57, 58, or whether it's the ECPs. So, the longer that this tug of war between the president and the ECP keeps going on, the longer the date keeps on getting pushed forward, and that goes in Mr. Nawaz Sharif's favor. But, his return on 21st October becomes really important if he really wants to bring in a new lease of life into his party's political movement and political campaigning. Because if he's not on the ground, I don't think he can really connect to his supporters on the ground level. So he needs to make sure that he distances himself from a lot of the disasters that we saw under the last government, particularly the economic ones, which led to rising inflation. Of course, the narrative would be that the rising security threat is because the previous prime minister, the PTI prime minister, had resettled a lot of militants in the northern area. So he might want to pin all the blame of economic problems and security problems and political problems on the previous government of PTI. But, that could only take him as far. In addition, he will have to come up with some new, very appealing manifesto to his followers. Like, I was listening to Maryam Nawaz Sharif Saiba, what she said today, and she said that, if Nawaz Sharif comes back in power with an overwhelming majority, all the economic woes of the populace will be addressed, and it's going to be a relic of the past, all the economic collapse and the general disillusionment that has been witnessed in the country in the past few months, actually I would say years. So let's see. I mean, I don't really believe that Nawaz Sharif would have a magic wand.
Right. I'm glad that you spoke about that, because I spoke about this yesterday as well in terms of this savior concept that we sort of put on different individuals. And Ms. Batool, I want to explore that further, because I understand that Mr. Nawaz Sharif has his position and his role to play, and of course his own influence. But then it has this concept of somebody coming in and saving us from all our troubles. Do you think this concept has retained its value over the years, especially in terms of perhaps how a lot of that was put on also the PTI chairman and the former prime minister, and many were disappointed. I'm sure that there are others who might have been disgruntled with their own leaders or whoever they supported. But I want to know whether this effect that political leaders use to garner support, do you think that has lost its value in Pakistan?
All right. So is this question to me or her?
Ms. Batool, please go ahead.
All right, yeah.
I believe that more than 60% of our population is youth, and they are contributor towards the vote bank. And I think that they are unaware. I don't believe that they are the concept of savior or in. I think they live in an era of social media where everything is even quick output. This is how they. Although political systems are slow, eventually the output is something they expect. So I believe that in this era, the terrorism and economy is a big challenge Ashraf is going to face, and we have these issues. I don't so that only the political slopes and crowds on the roads and the street park anything if we do not have the plan. And PM, even the PDM government, upcoming government after elections, they are only with IMF plans. Will be of three governments. So I think usually will be going to contribute, will going to be contributing progress. It be accumulated to be collective from the establishment.
Right, Ms. Batool, unfortunately, I'm unable to understand. There's some problem that we're facing, and your voice is breaking, so I'm unable to understand. But I'll come back to you because your perspective is valuable, and I want to return to that. Farrukh, the way that you have mentioned previously also about how different political parties haven't really prepared themselves for elections, and there's a lot of call and talk about early elections, but there hasn't been a lot of preparation that has gone into it. So when we take a look at what sort of is being counted on from Mr. Nawaz Sharif, do you think that the kind of preparation that needs to be there in terms of substance from the party is there also, and there's work done on that, or are they just counting on his person to have value?
Right, Sana, I think that is an interesting question. Remember that in politics also you have something called muscle memory. You do remember that Mian Nawaz Sharif, when he was Prime Minister of the country, there were many breakthroughs that took place. For example, CPAC came to the country. There was a time when we would never cease discussing motorways and connectivity. So I think there is something in there regarding his own record, and I think if he comes back, there will be that muscle memory that will actually be revived. But when it comes to program, unfortunately, we haven't seen any program, and there are 2 or 3 things that are very serious. One, it seems that PML N has been in power for 14 months, right? 14, 15 months, in which we have seen that some huge mistakes were made. And I don't know how PML N will be able to extricate itself from those mistakes. For example, one by one, the party has been alienating its allies. First of all, we saw that Shehbaz Sharif was running the government very fine, and Miftah Ismail was the finance minister who had finally worked out a deal with IMF, and then suddenly we saw that Ishaq Dar was imposed on the country, and immediately what happens is that it alienates by default all the economists in the country, and of course IMF. The way Ishaq Dar Sahab kept on managing things, you can ask anybody, and there will be near universal agreement that he was thinking in terms of 2010s, whereas this is 2020s. And in this decade, things and dynamics are different. Similarly, I mentioned how they have alienated People's Party as well, and I think this alienation is going to go further. And even though Election Commission will be actually working around the clock to ensure that all the grievances are addressed, People's Party's grievances are addressed, but those concerns will be there, and People's Party will actually use it to their advantage. Similarly, in media also, we have seen some kind of favoritism. So the question is not whether Nawaz Sharif is coming to the country will have an impact on elections or not. The problem is there are many unknown unknowns. For example, even if he returns in October and he is given 3, 4, 5 months to prepare for elections, we don't know how much time will it take for him to actually come out of captivity, because at this moment we know that he is going to be detained when he comes back, because there are cases and he is actually proclaimed offender, right? With that kind of a situation, PML N, if I don't know who was advising PML N, if it was Maryam Nawaz's point of view or advice, I think it didn't prove to be good. If it was somebody else's, it is also backfiring. So I don't know right now how effectively PML N can capitalize on whatever positives they have done in the past. Sana.
All right, Faisal, given the fact that when we take a look at this situation, there's also what Farrukh was talking about in terms of what has previously happened, and that is also something that is being quoted by PMLN leaders saying that here's what he has done before, this is what he has solved, this is what he's done to bring everyone together and solve such a huge issue, and so he is the answer. I want to know whether, given the fact that somebody may have accomplished something in the past, is enough evidence for them to be able to do it again, especially given how different the country is.
Sana, in Pakistan, yes, it is enough, and it is more than enough, I would say. And of course, he has been thrice Prime Minister of this country for a long time. Obviously, PMLN has a history of ruling this country, and if since last year they were only demanding level playing field, and that level playing field obviously proclaimed that, of course, if Mia Muhammad Nawaz Sharif is back in the country and is allowed to be part of the campaigns and allowed to be elected and come back to the parliament once more and becomes the premier of this country once more, then of course there will be a solution. We know that the ideology of the PMLN, of course, it circles around, as the name shows. Obviously, it is Nawaz Sharif's party, and of course, their ideology, we have seen that in past it has worked, and once more it will work. If there will be changes, then of course them changes would be in accordance to, as Farrukh has earlier said, that 20s is a different ball game and 10s was a different, and now I think they need to fix themselves as well, that if they are coming, then they should have a different plan for the 20s, and that is how it is. If we look at PMLN's strategy, of course they are going to achieve the level playing field. Now it's more of People's Party whether they have achieved the level playing field or not. So far, of course, they are quite content with whatever they have, the share in Sindh. And yes,
are they? Have you listened to their presser today?
And
or last time?
And they have plans to look towards, of course, the Western province. I'm talking about Balochistan. They are looking towards it. They have their own plan, very clear. And of course, Bilawal Bhutto wants to play it a bit differently from whatever his father wants to play it, and his father would of course focus on PDM's gelling with each other, and if there are possibilities, then of course he will be looking for seat adjustments or not. But as long as Bilawal Bhutto is concerned, Bilawal Bhutto wants to go ahead aggressively and on.
All right, Mr. Muneeb, a quick question from you. When we take a look at the situation of the judiciary, there seems to be a big change coming up, of course, and we have a lot of discussions on who the Chief Justice is impacts the way that the courts move and the proceedings that take place. I want to know whether you think that that will have any impact on the legal implications that are due for Mr. Nawaz Sharif.
Of course it would have, because, between Mr. Saqib Nisar up till Chief Justice Umar Atab Bandial, there has been this impression that the top judge, by which I mean chief justices, successive chief justices of Pakistan, have been very pro PTI. Now, I don't think that Justice Qazi Faiz Isa is pro PTI. If anything, I mean we've got to go by the history that he has shared with PTI. I don't mean to say that he is going to be biased against PTI, but I can certainly say that one expects that he is not going to be pro-PTI in particular. So that means that perhaps he is going to be looking at things and revisiting cases of the past with a fresh perspective and hopefully a much more neutral perspective. And that sounds like, some good tidings for Nawaz Sharif and PML N.
All right, Ms. Batool, one last question. When we talk about the overall impact on Pakistan and what we hope from our leaders and political parties, do you think that the return of Mr. Nawaz Sharif is a welcome development, is a better step for Pakistan than him not returning to the country, whatever that means?
This is a welcome news. It is a very much welcome news, but it has to happen. Like my other colleague was saying, that we have a lot of dates. And it is, we are very unsure about the fact that whether he's dead or not. But I believe that we should not get this fight of Section 2 and Article 48. We should wait for delimitation. We have to commission work and wait for the elections. I think we should not get more legal fight. I think we cannot.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Muneeb, Qadir and Ms. Batool Rajput, and being a part of the discussion regarding what lies ahead. We're going to quickly move to our next segment, which focuses on what is happening within India, and especially in terms of the Anantnag clash. And I want to know, Faisal, whether or not you think that this is just the beginning of what we'll be seeing in terms of what seems to have been happening previously as well when elections are coming up.
I just want to obviously say that, of course, we know the very recently Satyapal Malik, who happened to be governor of Indian illegally occupied Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, he himself said it that, of course, India has the habit of, as soon as the elections are close, especially of Modi, they do conduct false flag attacks. And we have seen in the past that, of course, their own soldiers, they were attacked by themselves to portray it as if the freedom fighters, they are attacking them, and they portray as if they are more needed in there, and of course their government is more needed in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, because they are fighting the war as they claim against the terrorism, whereas it is of course the freedom fight. In this particular case, Anantnag is very important, obviously, district. In this district, there is Amarnath Yatra that takes place, and if we talk about the demographics of this particular district, there is a 50-50 ratio of Muslims and Hindus. And if we talk about in past whether many of the events took place like this, yes, they did. The freedom fighters, they feel easy staying around there, and they have attacked in past as well. So if I would consider it by the freedom fighters themselves, then I would call it, of course, it is a fresh wave of their calls for freedom. So to me, I think it was a huge hit back for the Indian army itself in that case. But I would go with the Modi stance and BJP stance, and their modus operandi is, as soon as the election comes, of course, the false flags, they are seen around a lot, and this could be one of them.
Right, but I remember, Farrukh, previously also we talked about the possibility of false flag operations, and Faisal himself actually was of the opinion that they know better than to go down that road again. Do you think that this is perhaps something that they can still risk, and especially if we talk about the illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, even if this is an excuse of increasing militarization in the area, what can be done about it? Because it seems that they don't really need an excuse even since it's already very heavily militarized, and even if they do so, who's going to ask them?
Right, Sana, I don't remember that episode where Faisal was saying that there might not be false flag operations, but for memory's sake and for your argument's sake, I'm going to actually believe that it was how we argued. So this time the argument has flipped, and I'm going to say that they are not going to take their route of false flags. I know that there is an incredible history, and it has been used in the past for election winning as well. We saw what happened in Pulwama, and of course the interview that Faisal was referring to is there as well, where there is direct implication that there was some kind of false flag, or at least deliberate laxity regarding security of those personnel. But having said that, and by the way, also bear in mind that whenever there is some kinetic operation, you know, there are elements who are hardened, and hatred actually sort of congeals into the system. And we have seen that India and Pakistan have been fighting this Cold War for 76 years, Sana. So the hatred on Indian establishment side is incredible, and I know that in RSS there are elements also who have actually imbibed that hatred. Having said that, my concern right now is that which foot does Narendra Modi want to put forward. And I have seen that recently when G20 summit was going on, at that time also, if you remember, every time in the past, a US president would actually visit New Delhi. At that time, there would be something, you know, false flag would be there in Kashmir, and the blame would always be put on Pakistan. But this time, nothing of the sort happened. I think that Narendra Modi has outgrown that, you know, limited perspective of hatred in India. And I think that while there are elements who might want to actually keep on creating that kind of confusion or problem, Narendra Modi wants to be known as a statesman now. So he is going to take the route of peace. And I think that anybody who is trying to do similar kind of things, this time he is going to, you know, crush them and repress that sentiment. Sana.
All right. Thank you very much, Faisal, for being part of the debate, and of course, Farrukh, for being part of the debate as well. That's all that we have from the show, and we'll, of course, keep on talking more about what's going on, both within Pakistan and outside of the country as well, and thinking of what really is happening and trying to understand the questions that, of course, are there, and then, of course, updating you while we're at it. That's all that we have from the debate. See you tomorrow.